Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. Have you made a New Year's resolution or decision concerning how you power your home? We are joined by Managing Director of Soch Limited. Now, Soch stands for Solar, Occupational, Environmental, Safety and Health Consultancy Limited. So the Managing Director, Sión Faria, he joins us to look at the benefits of residential solar electricity and other issues. Welcome, Mr. Faria. All the best for 2023. How are you?
Of Soch Limited.
Mr. Faria, how are you do, sir?
Sorry?
How are you?
I'm good. I am good, man. I'm good.
Great. All the best for 2023. But I want to start off asking, some persons, they may be looking at electricity rates, wondering about making the switch to solar, but they don't know anything about solar panels, etc. What is the first thing that you would tell them?
I would say it's good that you have a forward thinking mind because it shows that you have some level of yearning for independence from electricity. You have some yearning for one less thing to hold that the government can hold against you, which is the electricity. So that means you are already thinking in the right direction. You're already looking to step in the right direction, and solar is the way to go. We have a lot of sun in Trinidad, and we have to take advantage of it.
No,
so that is what I would say to guys who looking to come out into the solar industry.
Okay, but it's one thing to say, okay, well, we want to take advantage of the sun, and yes, sun shining, and when the sun shines, we want to ball it too wicked and all kind of things. But it's another thing to say, okay, well, what kind of money do I need to put out? And then sometimes when people hear the amount of money on the initial investment, they may balk a little bit. So even before we start to speak to transition, what would you say, or how would you counsel somebody to conserve, ways that we can conserve, looking at conservation instead of that full transition?
Well, instead of doing the full transition, as you said, you can look at switching out all your bulbs to LED bulbs. Now, this is actually a common misconception in Trinidad. You see those spiral CFL bulbs? People assume those consume the same amount of energy as a LED. It does not. It consumes way more than an LED. However, it doesn't consume as much as an incandescent. But if you were to switch out all your lights in your house to LED, you would see a slight change bill by just switching out lights alone, right? Another thing, what persons like to use is a dryer, right? Now, I consider a dryer a luxury item. I grew up hanging up clothes, and it works well, very little money to output, and it's a reliable source because in terms of some dryers actually mash up your clothes, depending on what type of clothes you have. So I would always say those two things are two crucial things in reducing the bill. Also, I would like to add in one more. The use of, you see those tankless water heaters? Those tankless water heaters, as innocent and as small as they may look, they consume a very large amount of electricity.
Also,
it may not be on for long, but for the time it's on, the consumption is monumentous. So those three things I can say are steps you should kind of learn to switch out. You might be able to boil a little water, hang up some clothes, or even get a solar water heater. That would greatly reduce your bill. Those three things, what I mentioned, they could reduce your bill by about more than 50%. That's those three things alone. And I didn't even start talking about AC units and stuff. But just those three things alone is a step in the right direction.
All right, and continue. If someone wants to take even further than the step, they want to take the plunge. What is the initial phase and in terms of getting solar panels, switching to solar, and is there a way that you can start smaller and then possibly scale it up?
Yes. So actually my company, Soch, we actually specialize in these smaller systems, very affordable, and they actually work pretty well with your essential items. Now, I consider essential items your phone, laptop, fan, TV, radio, lights. Most of those 110 volts appliances I consider those essential items. I consider things like AC units and dryer, that's luxury items. That is when you have a little bit extra money, so you want to spend it on nice luxurious
You
items.
talk about fridge yet, though, huh?
I don't design systems for those. Sorry?
You haven't spoken about a fridge yet. What kind of divide do you have that on?
Right. So a fridge, no. Fridge is a kind of, it's a up and down kind of thing where solar is concerned, because you see, you have to make sure and get an inverter fridge. That is the name, that is the design of the fridge. Those inverter fridges consume way less energy than the regular fridges with, with the metal piece in the back where there's hang up clothes to dry. Yeah, you should probably get rid of those fridges because the compressors in those fridges are of older models and they tend to pull a lot of current when they are on. So if you have to go to solar, you should get what is called an Energy Star rated fridge. Those are usually the ones with the little yellow stickers on the front. When you go in courts and then you would see some of them, look at those types of fridges, and those will be able to run on solar way better and for a lot cheaper.
Okay, and you spoke about looking at the essentials versus those that may be a lot more on the luxury side. But is there a way to combine the two? So saying, okay, well, I'm not going to have to put out the initial cost, so I'd switch totally to solar energy, but I'm still using the infrastructure that is there, but I'm using less of it. Is there a way to do that? Is that something that Soch does as well?
Yes, so there is another way you can do it, which is you would have like a backup system in your home, right? So Soch essentially puts that backup system in place where it's not meant to be running 24/7 on solar, but in the event that current goes, you could just switch to solar using something called a manual transfer switch. So it connects to the grid of your home, but it isolates the solar on a separate grid, so to speak, right? And you can use those, but just for backup in the event that current goes. Because if you want to run everything on solar for 24/7, that requires a significant investment. And personally, I find, even though I sell solar, I personally find those prices are ridiculous for somebody to pay. So that is why my company specializes in those smaller systems that effective when current go on, you don't feel like you're going to die. You still have a good form of comfort. You still could put on your fan, charge your laptop, internet, those different things, those essential things. And that is why I would always point customers in that direction, because, as I said, it's a lot easier on your pocket and it's very reliable and it works pretty good.
All right, so this is something that we're going to pick up in terms of like how it is you actually can have different things going into the grid at your home. But we do that when we return. We are speaking with Sión Faria, the Managing Director of Soch Limited. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on looking at the benefits of residential solar power and also how you're able to make that transition. We're doing so with the Managing Director of Soch Limited, Sión Faria. And Mr. Faria, let's talk some figures now, because it's one thing to say, yes, man, it's working, and yes, man, this costs a little less. But in terms of, and I don't need to ask possibly the exact figures, but give me a range, one, and how fast is it before the initial investment starts to pay for itself, so you say, yes, man, it was worth making that transition or making that decision?
No, you have to be specific. So you're referring to if you want your whole house to be on solar or just essential items?
Let's start with essential items.
Because it's two different.
I can imagine.
Okay,
so let's start with essential items, thanks.
Okay, so essential items, essentially, those items usually don't pull a lot of electricity. So if your initial goal in solar is purely just to save money alone, I will not advise to go solar, because electricity rates in Trinidad are very, very low, right? We might think it high because of relativity, but globally speaking, we pay some of the lowest electricity rates in the world, right? And in that aspect, I would say solar is not something you're going to get your return on investment in the short term. It is a long-term investment. But those are for residential clients. However, for rural clients who have no access to electricity, solar is economically viable for persons who are in rural areas. So if you're looking at figures, as I said, you would look about probably 5 to 10 years for you to get your return on investment if you're looking at essential items, right? If you're looking at items, luxurious items, you're looking at 10 to 15 to even 20 years return on investment. So I would always push people into going solar. Start off small, so that even when you don't just think about the savings, think about the security. Because in terms of security, when current gone, you would still have some lights in your house, you would still have some access to electricity, you would still have some access to your phone. You might be able to wash clothes using a microwave because the smaller systems could run a microwave as well as a washing machine. Sorry, and yeah, that will be the better option to take because, as I said, electricity prices are very low in Trinidad. So going solar is not something that's immediately economically viable. I would say this, I would go off on Alam and say this. Barbados basically pays 6 times our electricity rate. Now, usually, an average household in Trinidad, for every 2 months, the electricity rate is about, let me say, you would pay about between $600 to $800 for the 2 month cycle, generally speaking, right? Now, that is the rates now. Now, you would imagine if we was living in Barbados, that's $600 multiplied by 6. That's $3,600 you would pay every 2 months using the same amount of electricity you're using right now. Nobody in Trinidad going to pay $3,600 to TNTech. Nobody. Everybody will go solar in that aspect. That is why in Barbados, every house has a solar panel on it because it's economically viable there. So you see the power struggle it is with solar in Trinidad because
It's almost
as I
as though
said,
it's almost as though you're
electricity
kind of
is
forced
cheap,
in
which
that
is a good
direction,
thing,
even
by
if
the way,
you
right?
had any quabblings about it. But give me a figure or a range, thanks, in terms of like, yes, you said 5 to 10 years, but what is that range? What kind of figure we're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, you can give us the example drawing the average of 600 or for the 2 month cycle. What kind of range we thinking of? And this is for the security aspect in terms of like that backup system.
Right. So you're asking for a numerical value?
Yes, please. How deep I need to dig into my
Right.
pocket for that level of security?
Okay, so for a regular 3 bedroom house, right? If you're looking to back up your entire house, which includes your AC and everything, for a regular 3 bedroom house, you're looking at about $60,000 to $70,000 installed. Right? That's the backup systems. If you're looking at continuous running systems, you're looking at over $100,000 installed for a 3 bedroom house. But for the smaller systems that we sell, right, you can start it off at $8,000 to $10,000, which is significantly lower, but it runs most of your 110-volt appliances, and it's an upgradable system. So in the event that you want to run more stuff, you can just add on more panels as you see fit. So this system allowing anybody in Trinidad to get access to solar energy.
No, that I don't necessarily believe in absolutes, but I really appreciate that difference in figure. But what are some of those logistics though? Because yes, okay, you might be able to say, oh yes, I have the money to be able to do this, but what are some of the other logistics in terms of how much space do I need? Do I need storage for batteries? Installation needs, do I need a flat roof, or the roof needs to be at a certain angle? And even if I'm at an apartment inside of a larger property, what are some of those logistics?
Well, so the logistics essentially for the backup system, that is, right? All you would need to do is get the electrician to install something called a manual transfer switch, right? And the roofs, the tilt of the roofs, because of where we are located on the equator, right? The tilt of the roof, it serves, I mean, it isn't a big factor in putting the solar panel on your house because, as I said, we live very close to the equator, which means the sun doesn't really vary in its position throughout the year. Just a little bit coming on to Christmas, right, it might get a little darker, But generally speaking, most solar systems are designed for 5 hours of sunlight. In Trinidad, we get approximate sun value of 7 hours. So the tilt of the roof isn't particularly important. I mean, the flatter the roof, obviously, the better, but it isn't a significant, it isn't a deal breaker in getting solar in Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of if you're a part of an apartment, all you would have to do is just isolate your meter box and install a transfer switch next to it, and you just run the switch, you would run all the wires up to the solar panels on the roof, and that's it. You could also install this, so it doesn't always have to go on the roof. It could even go on the ground. You could have a ground-mounted system. So there's a lot of options. And installation for these systems usually don't take long. At most, for a residential house, it might probably take about a day. Okay. So it's very easy to implement into your house. But as I said, the only hurdle for solar right now is really the cost factor. But there's a growing interest in getting solar in Trinidad, and I've noticed it throughout the years. So that is a good sign, because it means Trinidadians are starting to think forward, and we're starting to understand that, hey, well, this is something to have, not just for saving money, but for also safety.
And whether or not we're in Trinidad or in Tobago, we have about 2 minutes more, and I want to get to. I want to be ambitious now. So okay, well, we've scaled up from where we originally were, so now we're creating excess. What are some of those things and the considerations that you have in mind when you hear talk about overproduction and possibly storing energy or putting energy back into the grid? What are some of those things that come to your mind when you hear those? When you hear about that?
Well, grid tie systems, which is putting back power into the grid. The issue with that in Trinidad is that the legislation does not provide for bidirectional current flow, which is current flowing back into the grid. Most of our meter boxes are just unidirectional, so it's just power coming into the house. But we would have to do a huge infrastructural change to allow meters and solar to push back current into the grid, which would turn your meter backwards, which would mean TNTech essentially had to pay you instead. Right? But it is not just the infrastructural level, it's the legislative level as well, because in the TNTech Act, you actually have to change the law as well. So it's not just, okay, just install a few more transformers and change your meter. It's not that simple. It's a lot more complicated to do something like that. However, if something like that is done, it would definitely reduce the cost of solar, and it would show a little bit more economic viability.
I guess we could use money for other things going down the road. But we want to thank you so much, Mr. Faria, Sión Faria, Managing Director of SOCH Limited, Solar, Occupational, Environmental, Safety and Health Consultancy Limited. And on behalf of the entire TTT team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.